Video clips on blindness tips, a series of video demonstrations for daily living skills for the blind and visually impaired, presented in conjunction with the Washington State School for the Blind.
My name is Jake Cook, and I'm a residential life counselor with the Learning Independence for Today and Tomorrow program, which is a residential education program serving young adults ages 18 to 21 years of age.
And my name is Stephanie Face. I'm one of the daily living skills teachers here at the Washington State School for the Blind. Welcome to part 2 of our video series on how to label appliances for visually or cognitively impaired users. If you haven't seen part 1, we suggest you watch that first. It describes our common marking materials and a little bit about how to use them. As we learned in part 1, good marking system will be simple, defined, and readable. By simple, we mean that you should limit the markings you use to a certain few. And this will also help avoid having an overly cluttered display that is hard to read. By defined, we mean that you should only use a couple of symbols and make sure they're consistently used. Because if you use an X for a start button on one appliance and then use it as the stop button on another appliance, this might be confusing.
Now I would like to take some time to provide some suggestions for labeling tactually and in Braille. First, tactile and/or Braille labels need to be obvious to what they refer to. Second, Braille labels need to be placed horizontally and right side up, because Braille is not read diagonally or radially the way print sometimes is. And finally, I would like to provide some tips for labeling machines that are going to be used by multiple users. If possible, try to place Braille or other tactile labels so that they obscure the least amount of print as possible. This will require creative solutions because you still want the label to be directly over the button, so when pushing on the label, the button will engage.
The markings that you choose will differ based on the design of the machine and the skill level of the user. We'll continue to discuss how this impacts your marking decisions as we show you how to label microwaves, washers and dryers, ovens, and stovetops. Now we will look at a stovetop display and how you might choose to mark them. Typically, stovetops are controlled by radial dials that regulate the temperature. If there's room on the display, it's helpful to mark high, medium, and low. Some displays only leave room for high and low. It may also be necessary to mark the off position. This dial clicks into place when off, so there's no need to label it. It may be necessary to designate which dial controls which burner. Many of our students who are new to using a stove find these orientation markings helpful. Looking at our stove, the far left dial on this stove controls the front left burner and is labeled FL. Feel free to abbreviate these designations to save space and reduce clutter. Some users can memorize the location of each dial relative to the burner that it operates. If you have a gas range instead of electric, the marking procedures will be very similar, but it will depend on the individual controls of your stove. For example, most electric ranges will turn clockwise for the high temperature, while gas ranges typically turn counterclockwise.
Generally, on an oven, you will find touch pads and rotary dials. To mark a rotary dial, the procedures are similar to those markings on the stove. To save space, it is important to mark the most common temperatures, which are generally 300, 350, 400, and 450 degrees. Some users prefer Braille, while other users prefer tactile dots. If you plan to label with tactile dots, it is important that the user knows which dot corresponds to which temperature. As you can see on this oven, we have marked the dot representing 350 degrees and another dot representing 450 degrees. The user simply lines up the dot on the dial with the corresponding dot on the front of the oven. This oven defaults to a bake cycle. The users must know that in order to broil, they turn this knob to the far right. One more click will take us to the self-clean cycle. This oven, on the other hand, has a numeric touchpad where users enter temperature and oven settings. For Braille readers, this is a perfect place to label numbers and function labels. This machine has a roomy display, allowing us to spell out the function labels. Many users prefer abbreviations. Some of the most common abbreviations used are B for bake, BR for broil, CL for clean, or C for clear or cancel. Perhaps also using X for off or ST for start. On this display, we've used the contracted Braille to spell out the word start, and we used temp to spell out the word temperature to save space. When you hit the bake button on this machine, the digital display defaults to bake and 350 degrees. Currently, there is no way to add speech output to these types of devices. But since this particular model defaults to 350 degrees, we can just count in increments. This machine does 5-degree adjustments. We have a Braille +5 and a Braille -5 labeled on this display. So if you needed to set the oven to 400 degrees, for example, you would punch the up arrow 10 times.
The microwave is one of the most commonly used appliances. Most microwaves use a flat touchpad display. It is possible to purchase microwaves with rotary dials, but since the flat touchpad display is much more common, that's what we're going to show you how to mark today. A low vision user may be able to read the display with little to no labeling. If the user has a cognitive disability, one good marking method is to outline the function buttons, such as start, clear, defrost, and popcorn, with high lines. You could use different colors to indicate different functions if the person is not able to remember the location of specific function controls. For example, the start button on a microwave is usually near the bottom right corner. If color distinctions would not work for a particular user, you may look at an option such as using a variety of raised tactile shapes to differentiate the functions.
The microwave is a great appliance to label in Braille. If you plan on labeling your microwave with Braille, we suggest using Braille-On. We have found that it appears to adhere to the display and lasts longer than similar marking products. One of the most important parts to label is the number pad. It is possible to make a Braille overlay for the number pad to eliminate the need to cut out and stick on each number one at a time. To make an overlay, insert a 3x5 note card or other similar sized piece of paper into the Braille writer. Ask the user to write out the numbers using several different Braille space widths between each number. We have found that most displays require 2 to 3 horizontal Braille spaces between each brailled number. On a display like this, we generally omit the number sign that you would normally see in Braille to save space. Remove the note card from the Braille writer. Place next to the microwave's printed display. Visually check to see which spacing of brailled numbers lines up with the printed numbers the best. After determining the required Braille spacing for the rows of numbers, insert a sheet of Braille-On into the Braille writer and ask the user to braille out the numbers using the required spacing. Remove the sheet of Braille-On and cut out the 3 rows of numbers. And, with the user's help, ensure that the Braille is right side up. Remove the backing and place on the display. Make sure that pushing the numbers in Braille engages the button function. Since the number 0 generally sits under number 8, you may have to do this one individually. If this system seems too complicated, feel free to cut out each number individually and place them on the display.
Washing machines and dryers come with a large variety of settings and functions. They also include a variety of display types. First, we'll look at the washing machine. This machine features rotary dials and selector knobs. This type of display is the easiest to make accessible. Ask the user whom you are helping label the machines what kind of settings they would like labeled. This should be decided based on the laundry settings that they will use most often. Some users, for example, may never use the delicate cycle, so you can ignore that while labeling. Here we have the load sizes, water temperature selections, normal and delicate cycles, and the extra rinse function labeled in Braille on this machine. We also have each function labeled with different colored puff paint. This is useful for somebody who has low vision and the ability to see color, or somebody with a cognitive disability as they are able to match the red dot to the green dot. Now we will show you how to label the dryer. This machine also features rotary dials and selector knobs. We have the 20 and 60-minute markings labeled, as well as the heavy dry, wrinkle prevention, end of cycle alarm, and the start button. Again, we are demonstrating the use of Braille labels and highline dots to mark the settings. Remember, there are a lot of functions on both washers and dryers, and if you mark every single thing, the display will most likely become unreadable. Some newer model appliances are moving towards scrolling displays that cannot be made accessible with these methods that we've described to you. Until manufacturers have been convinced to include speech output with these types of displays, you might just need to avoid them where possible. Another common problem with labeling appliances is how to label shared laundry facilities, such as things that you would find in dormitories, laundromats, or in shared laundry facilities at apartment complexes. According to the Americans with Disabilities Act, all public facilities must accommodate those with disabilities. Please work with the management at the facility to find a solution that works for everyone. Creating visual and tactual labels that are simple, defined, and readable will allow cognitively impaired, visually impaired, and blind users to access their appliances with greater independence. Remember that these marking techniques we've shown you are only a few of the possible marking techniques, and you are perfectly able to make up things that make sense for your user.
Use this two-part video series as a guide to your labeling projects. If you would like more information about the products used in this demonstration or a copy of the video transcripts, visit the Washington State School for the Blind website at wssb.wa.gov. And thank you once again for joining us today.